Hi, welcome to the Small Shed. This weekend it's all about birthdays. See you in a minute. Now, it was my birthday a couple of weeks ago, and I had some nice presents, and I thought I'd just run through some of those because they are, most of them, woodwork related. Had a very nice cake as well, thanks to my daughter. Look up at Heritage Creative Cakes on Instagram. She produces some pretty stunning cakes, and I was the recipient of one with a circular saw blade through the middle of it this year. Let's just have a look now at some of the things I had, some of which I bought myself when I went down to Yandles for the weekend. Now, I had a customary bottle of single malt, which is very nice. I like the Islay peaty notes sort of whiskies, so that one's much appreciated. I think that's about the third one of those I've had recently, so got to like that quite a bit. I also had a book, a woodworking book from my wife. It's got a lot of stuff in it that's, a lot of it's basic, but some of it's quite useful stuff. So we'll put that and have a good look at that one. When I was down at Yandles the other weekend, I bought myself, as a present to me, a little Japanese pull saw, because I get on so well with the one I've got, the little Irwin one I've got, and I've got another small one for use in the shed, very thin with a thin blade so you can cut things off flush. And for a future project, which I'll talk about in a minute, I've got a rasp, one of these Shinto rasps. They are effectively virtually a set of hacksaw blades set into a pattern on a file, and they're pretty good at shifting wood. So they've come highly recommended. I'll try that out and see how we get on with it. And I bought myself a Bessey table clamp. These fit down on the workbench, and screw a screw underneath just to hold them down, but they're just useful for clamping down timber when you're working on it. So it needs a wheel underneath it just to really pull it up tight. They're nice and instant to be able to just put timber under. And then when I was at Yandles, I also bought a set of Abranet, different abrasive types. Got to try and sort out some sort of a means of storing those now. There's different grades, there's about 10 different grades there, and I need to do some sort of storage for those, but I thought I'd try that out as a hand finishing or even a machine finishing sanding aid. And then the other silly present I had, well, you always get a silly present, and that's a little timber locomotive that my wife bought me. I'm going to take that apart in a minute and just assemble it, because it's fairly quick and easy to do. And while I'm doing that, I'll bring you up to speed with one or two other things that are going on at the same time. Now, these things are, I think, they're not, I thought at first they were probably either laser cut or CNC'd out, but I think what they actually do is use presses the same as you get a jigsaw puzzle made by, to cut them out with a stamp, because you can see there is a very slight beveling of the timber all around the cut lines, and there's no burning on any of the joints anywhere, so I don't think it's laser or anything else. I'm pretty sure that's what they use, and these just pop out because they're actually punched right through. Now I had assumed these would be two identical ones for left and right, and one that would be different for the middle part, but actually they're all totally different pieces. That one is a reverse of the side, but there's completely different layout on them. But it's fairly straightforward. You just push out this very thin, it's a plywood I think, although it looks, yeah, it's only about a 3-ply, but they've obviously been just stamped right through, and you just push the pieces out, so it's going to be fairly straightforward. I could glue it, but I think we'll just clip it together at the moment. And then work round in number order from a list of instructions there, that it takes longer to actually find the pieces than it does to assemble them, I think. So what else is going on? The reason I went down to Yandles essentially was to get some proper wood, as I alluded to in one of the previous videos. I didn't say what that project was for. It's been on the bench for about 6 months now as a potential project, and it's had the title of GT1, which is not telling you anything, but in fact I'm going to make myself an electric guitar. Not that I know how to play a guitar, not that I know anything about guitars. I've never made a guitar. I've spent an awful lot of time watching videos of people making guitars for the last many years, so hopefully it won't be too much of a problem, but we will see how it goes. It's an experiment more than anything, but it does seem an intriguing mix of woodwork and electronics and all sorts, and at the end of it, if I get anything that even remotely plays, I will probably then have a go at learning. They say you're never too old to do anything. I suppose most of my misspent youth was spent with and around guys playing guitars, but I always seem to be the bloke behind a tape deck recording rather than actually doing anything on the artistic side. So that's what the timber was for. I bought some bird's eye maple, which will be being used for the fretboard, and I got a sufficiently large piece that hopefully it will be of use if I ever need it for a book match top, but I'm not really certain about that. I was intending to build a solid body anyway. I was going to buy some timber for the body of the guitar, but actually fortuitously a couple of days before we went down there, somebody came to me and said, I've been given a lot of shelves in Sapele that are 1.5 inches, 1.75 inches thick. Are you interested? So I had a couple. Now they're about 9 inches wide, I think, something like that. Beautiful, probably 40-year-old Sapele. So hopefully I can build the body out of that, because I'm producing something that's sort of Fender Strat style as a first build, because it's probably a little bit more forgiving than anything high-end. So that will be coming up in the future, and that's what all the timber was for, and indeed that's what the rasp is for as well, to do a bit of neck shaping. The other thing that came up at Yandles when I was down there, I noticed that they do wood turning courses, and as a big present from my daughter, son and wife, son-in-law, for for my birthday, they've given me a 2-day wood turning course down, so I'll be going back down to Yandles in November, hopefully learning how to get the basics of wood turning without giving myself serious injury. And that's something which I'll hopefully be able to get some video of and let you know how that goes as a course. And that will then mean that I'll feel a little bit more confident about going and using the lathe down at Menin Sheds without bits of wood flying across the room and killing people. It's something that, with the big sharp chisels and lumps of wood, I've not really felt very comfortable doing anything wood turning without any sort of tuition at all. It's all well and good saying watch YouTube or, you know, go and watch other people doing it, but it's not the same to actually watch as to do, and you don't really take it in as well as actually physically doing it. And the other problem is, of course, you don't know that half the people that you're watching on YouTube aren't doing it wrong in the first place. So I've got a course, it's by a guy called Paul Riddler, 2-day course, and I'll go down to my daughter's and just drive over to Yandles from there for the couple of days over a weekend, and hopefully we'll learn how to turn wood safely. So that's the other thing. So there we are. It's nothing quite like any locomotive I've ever had any dealings with, and I suppose it's a little bit inspired by American design, but at least it's probably recognisable as such. Got a load of little pieces that I must try and find a use for because they're just so beautifully cut out. But there we are. Hope that was of interest. Worth spending a few pounds on something like that as just a bit of whimsy one day. It's probably would be better to have been glued, but at the moment that will just go back into the workroom in my railway room and sit on a shelf. Hope that was of interest. Look forward to seeing you next week, and we'll be doing something different, hopefully a bit more constructive. See you then. Bye.